Morning, everybody. We'll just wait a couple of minutes for all the attendees to join, and then we'll get started. Okay, good morning and welcome. My name is Teresa Murad, and I'm the Director of Education and Diversity Programs at the Ecological Society of America. So we're here for day 3 of our very first virtual live discovery doing science education conference. Thank you all who have participated in the previous 2 days, and welcome to those who are participating today. And I would like to just point out that this conference is brought to you by a very dedicated team of partners, our live discovery partners from the Botanical Society, the Society for the Study of Evolution, and also, of course, ESA, where I'm from. And so this is definitely a very much a team effort. And today we are going to be it's going to be our final day at this conference. So I again like to thank our planning team from all these societies, representing these societies, as well as our high school teacher on the team here, and you'll meet him shortly this afternoon, Paul Strode. And I also want to mention all the other planning team members: Andrew, Megan, Katrina, Arietta, Rich, and of course Tom. So we want to, want you to know that we've been working really hard to put this together, and I think we've been hearing good things, so hopefully this is working for you as well. And of course, I'd like to thank all our collaborators who have helped us to promote the conference to the networks, and definitely our staff who have been doing so much behind the scenes. You've heard from Jessica every day, reminding you of what the links are and to join us and where to go. And of course, Jordan, who has been helping all the way through with communications and promotion and the website. And also I'd like to mention our student assistants. So yesterday and the day before for the breakouts, you would have found that we have had different links to facilitate the breakouts. And so these were actually run by the student assistants from the University of Colorado. And we'd like to thank them all very much for their help. So now I'd like to actually go into this question again. Yesterday we raised this question, and I'm glad that Brian Dewsbury, our keynote yesterday, talked about how do we get to know our students, right? And that's kind of the starting place. And so we ran a poll yesterday. And so we found that 70% of you have attended for the first time, and more than 50% of our participants have been teaching for more than 10 years. So this is a group of people, our attendees who have lots of expertise and lots of wisdom. And we're so happy that you're able to join us. And of course, for others who are, who have fewer years in the teaching experience, nevertheless, I think we are all building up a whole arsenal of ideas and resources and techniques that we've been sharing through the last 2 days. And in fact, we actually have more than 200 participants registered, which is a record for us. Usually our live events are about half of that number. So we're very excited that this format is attracting a lot more people who are able to join us. So right now, I have more questions for you to see who we are in the community, and I'm going to launch the polling. So there are 2 questions. There's a, yes, oh, okay, I guess I did not put both questions down. But so there's a question: what's your current status, if you all would like to vote? Okay, so let's share the results. All right, looks like we have faculty at 2 institutions today. Very, very, very good. and also, of course, for your institutions and then the students as well. So welcome to everybody. Okay. And there's another question here. Oh, let's see. No, okay, sorry, that was it. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's who we have right now. And, we're really excited that you're all here to join us with in your different settings. Let's see. Right. So now I would like to actually introduce our conference chair. I want to take this opportunity to thank him actually, because he provided this vision of how a virtual format could work that would provide both a high level of interaction and options for participants. So colleagues, I present to you our 2020 conference chair, Andrew Martin.
Thanks, Teresa. It's a pleasure to be here, even though I'm in my room. I've been here for a while, actually months, but it's a pleasure to be here with you. I love meeting everybody, even though it's through electrons. So I'm in Colorado, and I'm a professor, and I'm also the chair of the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. I have done a whole bunch of things in terms of research, ranging from microbes to whales. But I think my most favorite thing of all to study and to think about and do is to teach and to learn how to teach. And so I love this conference, partly because I think ecologists are some of the best people on the planet, and teachers are the best people on the planet. When you put both of them together, it's just a group of amazing people. So I want to remind you, can you go to the next slide? So we were actually supposed to be up here during this time. So that's the town of Estes Park. And Estes Park, so that fire is coming over the Continental Divide, and Estes Park currently is evacuated. And so it's lucky that we're not here. It's unlucky that we live in a world where this is kind of becoming the new norm. So this is just a reminder that ecology matters, education matters. And so the business that we're doing is super important. Next slide. So this is pretty much our schedule. Probably looks familiar if you've been here on Thursday and Friday. So we're gonna have a couple keynote addresses, 3 of them, and then an education fair share after that. And then we'll do this part of this meeting is focused on the 4DEE framework for education and ecology. So we'll focus on that. Then there'll be panel presentations and followed by network topics. So I'm hoping you can attend all of these because everybody is dialed in, and it should be really fun. Next slide. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. So you can call us at that number, or you can send emails, and someone will respond to those emails. Okay, and so overall, we really want this to be a positive and inclusive experience for everybody. One of the things that we'd like to encourage you to do is to make sure people know who you are, because we're not in person. So one thing you could do, for example, is click on your the 3 dots on your picture and change your name so it includes your affiliation. Another thing is when you speak, just to make it clear who's speaking, just say your name and your affiliation, and that way we sort of get a better sense of who you are and where you're from. The other thing is we really want to encourage you to interact, and there's a couple ways to do it. In the webinars, you can use the Q&A. Yeah, good point. But the webinars is you can use the Q&A, or you can use the chat. In the other sessions, you can also use the blue hand, raise your blue hand, and we encourage you to participate as much as possible. And then the other thing we want to do is make this as inclusive as possible. So if there's lots of questions going on, and you've asked a question already, maybe hold your question until there's time at the end. So next slide. So our moderator for the keynote is Katrina Adams, and I'm just going to ask Katrina a couple questions as a way to introduce her. And one of the things I'm interested in is how she became the education director of the Botanical Society of America.
Oh, good question. So I have a PhD in paleoethnobotany. So my experience is as a uh, anthropologist and biologist, sort of combined, sort of a cross-disciplinary thing. I kind of wanted to be a curator, actually going into graduate school, and I didn't really prepare myself for that. I was prepared to be a tenure track faculty like everyone else. But I didn't really want to do that, and I wanted to stay in the region. So once I graduated in 2008, which was not a great time to be graduating, I was looking for more education, more museum experience. And I ended up working at Shaw Nature Reserve, which is where we have one of our presenters talking about. And I worked with the program, the Sift program that he's going to describe. And that was just so phenomenal. I enjoyed it a lot and learned a lot about the same kind of things that we heard from at yesterday's keynote, right? About the importance of stories and listening to people and getting different experiences. So after that, I ended up taking a position as the education technology coordinator for the Botanical Society of America. And I mostly ran the planting science program, which is a program that takes middle and high school students in their classroom and matches them up with scientists, volunteer scientists. And the scientists come from the BSA, but also from 18 other organizations. So ESA has been a partner with that for a long time, SSE. And we have a lot of scientists that volunteer their time for that. And so I worked with that program for several years. I worked with Claire Hemingway, was the education director. She moved on to NSF, and before I felt like I was ready, I took over for her and became the education director for the BSA. And it is not what I expected to be doing, but it fits very well, I think. And I think that's kind of the way a lot of folks feel about the careers they end up in. It's, you wouldn't have thought that this is what I want to be when I grow up as a, but when you look back, it does fit all of the kind of threads of education and the different disciplines and all of that. So it's a really fun, I feel like every day it's very easy to see how you make a difference. And I like that very much about the job.
Thanks, Katrina. And so I think now is a good time to transition to the keynotes.
You bet. All right. So what I would like to do is introduce, we do have 3 keynotes, and I'll introduce them like sort of one at a time as they give their talks. Again, Q&A is the best place to ask your questions. You can ask them at any time, but we'll be taking them at the end. I am really, really excited about this. I've been, the first few days, a lot of the themes that will be touched on in this have been coming up. So the theme for the overall conference is pushing past barriers, ecological science for all. And so I do feel like these keynotes talk a lot about both pushing past barriers and also, how we reach all students in ecology. So I don't want to take too much time. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker. Conchi, can you turn your video on? And you can unmute.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So so Dr. Concepción Rodríguez-Fourquet is from the University of Puerto Rico in Bayamon. Conchi started her career as a professor in 2004, right after finishing her PhD in biology from the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras. She has been involved in many projects with undergraduate students with the objective of promoting research, mostly in ecology. Early on, she became the mentor of a student organization called LIFE, Leading Initiatives for the Future Ecologist, for which she is still involved with today. Since 2008, she's been the BioBlitz organizer on campus. The BioBlitz is held annually on campus, most of the time lasting 24 hours. Currently, she's collaborating with an NGO working on the protection and conservation of land crab populations in a nature reserve. She's also part of a CREST program that promotes environmental neuroscience and looks at the effects of contaminants on the behavior of several species of invertebrates. And she's going to be talking about my very own BioBlitz. So go ahead, Conchi.
Okay, good morning again. It's a pleasure to be a part of this panel talking about the online teaching and learning in undergraduate and high schools. And as Katrina said, I will be talking about my very own BioBlitz. As you know, BioBlitz is an activity where the biodiversity of a particular place is researched and investigated. So at the University of Puerto Rico in Bayamon, we've been doing BioBlitzes for 13 years. And as Katrina said, most of them are 24-hour duration. So students go out on campus with several scientists or experts in the different areas, and they look for organisms. Sometimes they bring them back to the laboratory to do the identification. And we spend the whole 24 hours doing that. We do that to celebrate Earth Day, and it's mostly, I would say, completely organized by the Student Club Life, Leading Initiatives for the Future Ecologies, with the help of the Department of Biology and the administration, since we have to do some administrative stuff to do the activity. So this year is different, and we didn't want to miss the BioBlitz. So what do we do? What can we do to not miss this year? So we started talking on social media, and we got many ideas on different, you can do this, you can do that. And then we came up with the iNaturalist platform. So we decided, okay, let's do this a virtual BioBlitz. And the students set up a 2-week event that included all of Puerto Rico. Regularly, we were doing BioBlitz in campus and just with the students. But now, because everybody went home and we didn't know where they were, so we decided to open it up to the whole island and to include everybody that wanted to participate, not just the students in the university, anybody that came up with an advertisement, they can participate. So for us at the school, it was a requisite for some courses. They had to participate and they have to turn in a project. It was fun for others, even though it's fun for everybody. And we had community participation, friends and other people from the university that were not professors also participated. And then it turned out to be a competition between 4 teams in 4 UPR campuses. And these teams are composed of student clubs, and these student clubs are members of Sift. Sift is it's a program from the Ecological Society of America, and it happens that there are 4 campuses or 4 chapters that are members of the program. So it became the BioBlitz with everybody that wanted to participate, and then people started to be part of teams that they will choose. If they were part of the community, they will choose a team. So my friends are saying, okay, go into life, that's your team to participate. So this BioBlitz, I learned, it was an opportunity to learn about how to use an internet platform. And even though it's very easy for young people to get your phone and make an account into iNaturalist and find the activity, I got many calls from my colleagues saying, I don't know how to do this. How do I install the platform? And then after they were in iNaturalist, I don't know how to find the activity. So it was a learning curve for some people to get into the iNaturalist platform. It's an opportunity about learning photography or how to take pictures, because everybody has the phone and they can take pictures. But now it kind of different. If you want your plant to be, or your flower to have a good picture, or the invertebrate, then you have to learn to work with light and work with the background. So it was an opportunity to learn about photography, and I learned a lot. And I have some students saying, I don't know how to take a picture of a spider. It's so difficult. So they got to learn about how to do that. It's a learning opportunity about biodiversity in their own backyard, the porch, the balcony, or the indoors. And I think this is one of the most important learning experiences, because the students became aware of where they are and what their surroundings are. And not everybody has a backyard, not everybody has a porch or a balcony. And I got calls saying, Professor, I cannot participate because I live in an apartment. And then I said, well, yeah, it's true. And if you are not allowed to go outside, that's fine. But probably there's a plant in your apartment. So go to the plant. That's your first, that will be your first organisms to identify. And then look in the plant, look under the leaves, look in the soil. And if you're more adventurous, going to under the sink, see what's there, or maybe open the refrigerator and there's some old food that has fungus growing over it. So you will have a lot of I'm pretty sure you'll find something in your apartment, even though you don't have a porch or you were not allowed, or a backyard, or you were not allowed to go outside. So it's a way of learning and become aware of your environments. And then you learn about how to identify organisms, and the iNaturalist platform is very good because it helps you, it guides you to identifying the organisms. And even though I know it's not perfect, but then there's this network of other people that are, that they're looking at what the identification is going on, and they will come in, and then there will be kind of a conversation, like a person will say, no, that's not it, it's this. And then another person will come and say, no, it's this other species. And then it's like a long distance conversation until finally a correct identification is done. And also it's an opportunity to learn about the biology of organisms, especially for the students that had to turn in a project, because they have to turn in the picture, the identification, but they were also required to turn in a description of every organism that they identify. And I required them to have 10 species, and then with the identification and also a description of the organism. So those I think this is what we learned, and what was important about this BioBlitz. So the other part is kind of like the social part of the BioBlitz, and we had a closing ceremony at the end of the 2 weeks, and the student organized a symposium, and we asked 4 scientists from the University of Puerto Rico to talk for 15 minutes about their projects that were related to biodiversity. So we have that as beginning the BioBlitz closing ceremony. We have this activity. We presented the results, and we had awards, like, there were symbolic awards that were given to individuals and to the teams that won. So for the award ceremony, we have symbolic first, second, third place, and then the 4th place, because there were 4 teams. And we show how many observations, how many people were part of the team, how many observations were done, and also how many species were identified. Some species were not included because they were never identified, or the identification was not very rigorous, so those didn't count. We decided we will only count the ones that were rightly identified. And then we have the students talk about their experience. We also have the presidents of all the clubs to talk about their club and to present their members and talk about their experience in the BioBlitz. So we have kind of like this connection between all the student clubs. And then at the end, because this year was the 50th Earth Day, I happen to know, I have this friend that she helped to organize the first Earth Day in Washington, D.C. And I called her and I said, could you come and talk to the students? And she did. And this was a very, very motivational talk. She talked about how a person can make a difference, a single person can make a difference. And she encouraged students to develop their capacity to change the world and to help to conserve the biosphere. And this was the end of the BioBlitz, which I think was excellent. After that, students wrote messages saying that the talk was so motivational that they will continue studying biodiversity and making whatever they can do to the conservation of the biosphere. Thank you. This is my talk.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. So the next talk will be Andy Klingensmith from Shaw Institute for Field Training, and I'll read his intro. Andy is the coordinator of experiential learning programs at Shaw Nature Reserve. He has a bachelor's degree from University of Idaho and has been a professional in the field of environmental outdoor experiential education for the past 15 years. At SNR, he coordinates the Shaw Institute for Field Training, the Sift program, which aims to engage high school students from a diversity of backgrounds in the fields of environmental research and restoration. Through Sift, students receive hands-on field skills training with real-world applications of their training through partnerships with Washington University in St. Louis, researchers, and professors. His other duties at SNR include designing and facilitating school programs, creating and delivering interpretation programs, and producing virtual media. And he's going to be talking about the Sift virtual experience, how being thrust into virtual learning was just the kick in the pants we needed. Go ahead, Andy.
Thank you, Katrina. I appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Andy Klingensmith. Thanks, Katrina, for introducing me. Yes, I am the Experiential Programs Coordinator here at Shaw Nature Reserve. Shaw Nature Reserve is a division of the Missouri Botanical Garden, and we are located about 35 miles west of St. Louis. So as Katrina said, one of my main responsibilities is coordinating the Sift program. And today, I just wanted to share my experience with transitioning this in-person experiential field skills training program into the digital space, and how that was really the catalyst that we needed to evolve our program. So as Katrina said, SIFT is an acronym that stands for the Shaw Institute for Field Training. So we are an experiential training program designed to engage teens in the scientific exploration of the natural world. So this program is a collaboration between Shaw Nature Reserve and Tyson Research Center, which is the field research station of Washington University at St. Louis. So SIFT started in 2007, and we are currently in our 13th cohort, and we've welcomed close to 500 students over the years that represent about 70 different high schools. So during the summer, we offer a one-week in-person, well, we used to, in-person field skills training program. And then once the students completed that training week, the students got to choose to work on different work projects that we partnered them with scientists, professionals, and researchers in the field doing real-world work. So because these students are benefiting these professionals, they also get a little bit of stipend for their time. So I've been working with the SIFT program now for about 5 years. I've been the coordinator for 2.5 years. And since I kind of took over coordinating this program, I had these awesome ideas that I wanted to bring to the program that I thought would not only benefit the students, but would benefit the program as a whole. And so every year that we began planning for this program for the next year, I would sit there and I would think about these new ideas. I'm like, yeah, let's really do this. And then as we started planning, we realized that, you know, this program has been running for 13 years now, and it is a very well-oiled machine. And so I just didn't feel the timing was right back in 2018 or 2019 to implement these new ideas, simply because, you know, if it's not broke, you know, why fix it? So we were planning for 2020. Everything was looking good. Cohort 13, we had 25 students who accepted the invitation to the program. As we began planning, we all knew what happened. The pandemic struck. And so my staff and I were sitting around the planning table. And first we had to make a decision, like, are we even going to host this program? Is it even worth it? We felt our program being an experiential learning program, that its authenticity is in its real world application and practical skills. We were that square peg, and we thought that virtual learning was this round hole we tried to fit ourselves in. So taking from this scene here in Apollo 13, we felt that we needed to take a finely tuned program, in-person program, fit it into this virtual model that provides an authentic SIFT experience, only using these digital tools available to us. And this was a lot for us as an experiential program with very little knowledge about how to run a virtual program. We seemed out of our depths. So what our staff did is we took a moment, we took a step back, and we tried to remember, what is the foundation of SIFT? So this is what we came up with. So these are our 3 core tenets of the program: scientific knowledge gain, field skills training, and collaboration. This is the bread and butter of the SIFT program. And as we were utilizing these tenets to build our virtual program, it hit me. I realized that this is our moment. This is the moment where I can take those ideas that I've had for the past 2 or 3 years that I've never implemented simply because there was no need to. But now here was this open door for us to make changes in the program that I've always wanted to, but simply hadn't. And so for the next few slides, I'm just going to share with you what changes we made and how those benefited the program. So up at the top, you see one of our tenants, and then the digital tools next to them. Those are simply the tools that we utilized to engage students in this. So scientific knowledge gain over the past 12 years, I'd say 99% of all the information sharing came directly from Sift staff to the Sift students. And depending on the year, the Sift staff was either 2 or 3. And I always thought, let's invite professionals. These people have real world knowledge, they have a lot of experience, and they could share their time with the students. But in-person training, schedules didn't always meet up, professionals weren't always available. But then as we were forced into Zoom, we realized that Zoom makes professionals much more accessible. So what was new this year is the students got to learn from professionals in the field. And during training week, we met 8 or 9 different professionals that run the spectrum of environmental careers. And these students learn things like tick and wildlife ecology, ornithology, prescribed fire science, and more. And if you can see right here, here's Katrina. So this was an excellent addition to our program, and just the information that was shared just exponentially grew. So moving over to field skills training, during the in-person programs, what we began to realize through feedback is that students would associate field biology or ecological restoration with Shaw Nature Reserve or with Tyson Research Center. And we felt that we were missing this huge opportunity for the students to realize that they can in fact do this work in their own backyard. And again, by being thrust into this virtual sphere, that's what became available to us, this place-based model. We wanted the students to recognize that, yes, they can absolutely do field research and ecological restoration in their neighborhood field research station. So we sent out, prior to the training, we sent out Google Forms kind of asking the students what green spaces they had available to us. Because like Kanchi mentioned, some students don't have a backyard, but most students and all students had a green space, whether it be a park, some had their backyards, but also some just had a patch of grass or greenery in the alley behind their apartment building. And that's what we wanted the students to focus on. So over the training week, these students did activities in their neighborhood field research station, such as doing their experimental design projects, which is all about ant baiting. We participated in National Moth Week, where the students just collected information on moths. We did a lot of iNaturalist BioBlitzes, and currently the students are working on their phenology study. They are simply observing and documenting how the natural world changes in their neighborhood field research station. So ecological restoration and environmental research left this 2,500 acre nature preserve and became hyper-local in their own backyards or green spaces. So collaboration is a big part of the SIFT program. After every single cohort, we get feedback from our students saying, this is where I found my community. This is where I was able to be myself and to find other high school students that felt the way that I did about the environment and environmental awareness and environmental stewardship. So we really wanted to make the collaboration a really important part of the SIFT program. So we utilize Zoom, their breakout rooms. The middle app there is a GroupMe app, which is just a text sharing. So we shared a lot of funny memes and nature pictures and stuff. But what I really wanted to do over the past few years is really connect the current cohort of SIFT students with SIFT alumni, and how can I utilize those alumni to be mentors to the students? So this year, and one of the most one of the proudest components that I've added to this program is this new SIFT student leader program. So I invited these 5 SIFT alumni to join us for our week-long training as a leader, as a student leader in a mentor role. And so these 5 student leaders not only were mentors and able to share their perspective of the program that is closely to the perspective of the SIFT students, they were the experimental design project managers. These 5 students hosted Chit Chatters time, which was simply our time for the high school students to meet on Zoom 15 or 20 minutes before the training week and just talk high school things, just talk teen things. And then these 5 leaders went through a leadership program with us at the Nature Reserve. And one of our big umbrella understandings of the Sift program this year is that we don't science alone. Even though we're sitting behind our own computers, we're working in our own neighborhood field research stations, we don't do this alone. And we wanted to create a human connection in the virtual space. So I did this simply by asking everyone, Sift students, student leaders, Sift staff, the professionals, to create this ecological identity tree, which is a fantastic way for us to reflect on our environmental philosophies. So by doing this, what was really awesome is our Sift students, these high school students, were able to look at these professionals' ecological identity trees and realize that they are much more connected, in the paths and the experiences the Sift students have are very similar to the professionals. And a great thing about these trees is it allowed these high school students to see a tangible way forward. For a while, these Sift students would say that I want to do environmental biology, but it's like this ephemeral idea. But now that they've met PhD people in research and they've seen their trees, this created a tangible pathway that the students can see themselves actually getting to that desired goal that they had. So I believe this presentation will be shared, and use this link. So I think this is a fantastic activity to make connections. So going virtual was really that catalyst needed to evolve the Sift program. And really with these new components, these will be a part of Sift for the rest of the cohorts going forward, and so there's no going back. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was great. All right, so then our third keynote is Jordan Gonzalez from Boyle Heights High School. So Jordan Gonzalez has been teaching in Los Angeles schools for over a decade. His background is in humanities and urban education. After graduate school, he started teaching in South Los Angeles and found it imperative to connect the classroom to real life, and began forming partnerships with community organizations to make learning more relevant. In 2014, he collaborated with the Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust to design, develop, and implement an interdisciplinary unit combining reading, writing, and gardening. Students explored the basics of soil management, crop and food production, green space, and access to healthy food. Since that early partnership, he's become a science teacher and has continued to build on community partnerships, including Friends of the LA River and plantingscience.org, and is an ongoing goal to bring scientists in to create meaningful learning experiences and expose students to the various STEM fields. So Jordan's going to be talking about the power of place-based ecology and online possibilities during distance learning.
Great, thank you so much, Katrina. All right, so I kind of want to take this morning to talk about my classroom approach before and kind of how that 2014 class inspired my approach, and then to now with distance learning, some questions I have. So my school is located just east of downtown Los Angeles. There's downtown Los Angeles. You can see the LA River is right between downtown and our school. And this part of the LA River is a concrete behemoth. And so there's my classroom, it's outdoors. These are my students. And so continuation students are they're beyond at risk. These are students who did not, they needed credit recovery for whatever reason. They had to drop out. A lot of them have childhood adverse childhood experiences. And what I have found is they may have failed biology, chemistry, and physics, but a lot of them, they're really sharp and they know all the content. It's just a matter of getting them interested in the content and really applying it to their lives and getting those credits recovered. So I have some amazing students, and it's just, yeah, I love them so much, and it's an honor to teach them. So in 2014, as you heard, I was at Fremont High School in South Central Los Angeles. This is my students in our English class working with the LA Neighborhood Land Trust, learning about gardening. And it was hands-on, and the great thing about it is it led to more opportunities. And I'll talk more about this later, but a lot of the students had opportunities to work as interns for them and got paid for it. And so it was a really, really great experience all around. So there are some valuable outcomes from that experience that I want to talk about that have shaped how I approach science education in my classroom. The first one was engagement. These are my Boyle Heights students last year when we were working with planting science, and they were presenting to scientists. This is them engaging with a virtual presentation from one of our scientists there. And I always want to engage my kids. And if I'm not engaging them, then it doesn't matter what else we're doing. So that's always one of the goals I'm thinking about. Second, I want to make my learning memorable. I know those students back in South LA will never forget gardening with the LA Neighborhood Land Trust. And on the left, you see a picture of my students last year working with a farmer, learning about like food production. And they may forget a lot of the lectures I've had, a lot of the activities we did, but they're not going to forget when the farmer came and showed them how to graft and plant an apple tree. And they're not going to forget the time they could eat as much as they wanted from his food that he brought to share with them. So I always try to go memorable. When I think about my education experience, I remember the bad experiences. So I remember my science teacher who was really, really mean and just made us read a bunch of textbook chapters. And I don't remember doing anything hands-on. And so that was a huge turnoff for me as a student. But I do remember in second grade that this theater troupe came to our school and read this story with us. They acted out scenes from it, and then we got to act with them and perform with this professional theater group. Now that has stayed with me forever. And so I'm always trying to approach my science education like, how can I get these kids to engage in a way that they'll never, ever forget that experience? I learned in that 2014 experience that place-based learning equals relevance and investment. You can see my school right here in the very bottom. And for the first time in my 5 years of teaching at that point, my students were so invested and so just, they found their learning so important. So I try to keep that in my mind. It was empowering. Like I said, this led to more opportunities for the students to make money, to work for the LA Neighborhood Land Trust. And a lot of my students had never really, a lot of them are first generation college students and they haven't been in college. And so this empowers them to think about themselves and see themselves as scientists in a field maybe they had never considered. And then the access, I always want to bring access. So this was last year. You see Dr. Matthew Bond on the top right, a good friend of mine. He's presenting his dissertation to my students at our continuation school. Now, I didn't even hear about dissertation. I'm a first generation college student. I didn't hear about dissertations. I didn't know about PhDs until I got to college. And so here we go, these kids who people have discounted in our systems really, I would say failed. They're hearing about his dissertation and then they're presenting their science projects to him and getting feedback. And then on the bottom left, you see one of our planting science mentors presenting to our students via Zoom while we're in the classroom. So how can I provide my students access to opportunities and experiences that they haven't had before? And so here's some questions I've asked myself since March 2020. And I have to say right now, it has not been easy. In fact, most days I feel like I'm failing. But when I answer these questions well, and I apply those things that I think about, I've had a lot of success. And I really, really think that my students won't forget the learning experiences. So the first question I've asked myself is, what projects can we assign to assess learning and make it more memorable and meaningful? So first quarter this year, we did a LA River unit, and we're looking at the ecology of the LA River, but also what factors affect the size of populations within the ecosystem. So we were able to virtually partner with that Friends of the Los Angeles River. In the past, we were able to go down there, but I'm confident that my students will remember the content because they care about the river and they have such a negative view of it. And just thinking about what it can become, I think they're not going to forget that. The second question I've been asking myself is, what can we assign students that will take them from the screens to the soil? And so you can see my virtual classroom on the left, and on the right, this is my student Luis building a biofiltration system with things that he has at his home. And so I've been trying to think about how can I get them more outside and into their homes and building things that will really drive the learning home with things that they have at their houses. And so this gives them the opportunity to think like scientists, think like engineers, and so on. The other question I've been asking myself is, what ecological and science partners can we join forces with right now? And so I've had a lot of success, and the Friends of the LA River have been phenomenal. They've actually offered more opportunities for more partnerships. So the Tree People are doing an event, a virtual event this next week, and I'm going to encourage my students to go because we're looking at urban green space and kind of the inequity of green space in our city. And so it just leads to more opportunities and it gets the ball rolling with that. How can we provide our students with access to scientists on the field? And so I've brought an engineer already. One of our goals this year was looking at how can we design an engineering solution to really bolster or revitalize the Los Angeles River. And so we brought in the LA River scientists from Friends of the LA River. But then I was able to bring in an engineer talking about how he approaches design problems and what are the criteria and constraints. And I'm certainly not an expert in engineering. So to bring someone in, it was just so engaging. And what I found interesting is as I gave him co-host control, I was kind of nervous. The students wouldn't have a lot of good questions, but they were messaging him, they were unmuting themselves, and it was a very successful class. And they were able to have exposure to a field that otherwise they wouldn't have exposure to. And the last question, rather than seeing the limitations, and we've seen this with all the keynotes this morning, but what are the possibilities of an online classroom? And I'm sure you all have great ideas too, and I'd love to hear them during the Q&A session. But as I think about possibilities, like Andy said, I don't think I'm going to go back. When we go back into the classroom, I think I'm going to bring in a lot of these things to my classroom. We're going to have more virtual guests. And I do think that this has forced us into 21st century learning more than anything in the past. So thank you so much for your time and listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, where's the Q&A now? Hold on, maybe I need to escape. All right, so we have a couple questions. We have a question from Cynthia. How did you modify field studies for all the different types of green spaces available to participants? E.g., did you have options that they could choose from? I think that's probably maybe for you, Andy.
Mm-hmm. So can you read the question again, Katrina?
Sure. How did you modify field studies for all the different types of green spaces available to participants? Mm-hmm. E.g., did you have options that they could choose from?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, we really simplified, I guess, the training. We took the, I guess, what was like the most important parts of the field skills training activity, such as like if we were doing a tree survey here at Shaw Nature Reserve, we would do many, many different trees. But at their home field station, we would just simplify that down to any woody species. And if a student didn't have woody species in their neighborhood field science field station, they would just say not present. That's part of the field research part of it. So we just tried to really simplify what students could be doing at their home. I also asked prior to the training week, when I sent out that Google form asking about what is in or about their green spaces, I also asked what they had available to them. Like, did they have woods available to them? Did they have just a simple patch of green available to them? Did they have a park that had flowering plants and prairie grasses and birds? And so we really got an idea of what students had available to them prior to the training week. And then we transitioned and adapted those activities to the, I don't want to say to the individual field station, but we had one single activity that we knew that all of our students could complete based on what they told us ahead of time.
Awesome. There's also another question from an anonymous attendee for you, Andy. Can you tell us more about your phenology study?
So I've read the book A Forest Unseen by David George Haskell, and I highly recommend anybody who hasn't to do that. But this is a biologist who simply spends an entire year sitting at a single spot in the woods in his neighborhood and simply watching how the natural world changes. I also did this was also an assignment I had in college. And so really what I asked the students to do is they pick a single spot starting in July. And that spot was their spot to sit and watch the natural world change. And they documented that either via just pen and paper or taking pictures. Some students wrote poetry about the changes that they found. But it's all about the big goal of this project was for the students to like slow down and take some time and watch how the world changes around them. Because I think too often we're too busy in our day-to-day lives to watch how things change. And so that was the purpose of this phenology study. So I hope that answered the question.
I think so. There was another question that we had earlier that I think was right after Conchi's presentation, but probably applies to everyone. Did anyone just experience technical difficulties using iNaturalist, internet connectivity? This is specifically in relation to the BioBlitz, but I think it could be asked more generally.
Yeah, I could say that's something you need to expect. Build that into your program, is that you're going to have technical difficulties, especially with students not having, everybody has a different internet connection. So I think the most technical difficulties we had was just via Zoom, people losing signal, or students, their volume wasn't working correctly. And so build that in, and that's what the chat function is really good for. And that's why it's also really important to have like a co-host on board. I remember twice during my training program, my computer just completely froze. And I was frozen out for like 30 minutes. It was terrifying. But I heavily relied then on my co-hosts and my other Sift staff, and they just picked the ball up and just kept rolling with it. So that's from the Sift experience.
Yeah, for the BioBlitz, because it was 2 weeks and it was individual. Maybe if there was a problem, they will just try later that day or the next day. So that for that, I don't think that will matter. But yes, and I start, I always assume that they are going to have problems, that somebody will not be able to connect, that all that is going to happen anyway.
Jordan, anything to say on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big challenges for us was getting kids access to even internet. And I remember when things shifted, we were literally just given laptops out and documenting as much as possible. But one of the things I try to do is create multiple means for accessing the content. And so we weren't allowed to record early on, but I'll pre-record different lessons, and then giving students multiple ways, like they can go back and access lectures later on. Also, I think the hands-on activities are great because you don't need your technology, you just need to document it somehow. And so just giving them multiple ways to document that has been really valuable.
Great.
Katrina, let me kind of just add something really quick that I found, and when we were planning, actually in our posts, when we were having our debrief of the week, I think it's really important to access your program before the training on different devices. For the entire program, I was doing it on a laptop. And so I just had this perspective that my program was being run through a laptop and then it wasn't until we started that I realized, well, I knew students were on their phones, but the lack of accessibility to files on your phone, so it's easy when I'm behind a computer, but when a student is just simply behind their phone. So I would really spend some time before you host any of this online stuff to access your program through different devices and just see what the students are seeing. And that might help rebuild or kind of reformat your program.
Awesome. So a couple other questions. Here's one from Andrew. There's value in both the hyperlocal and in thinking about spaces that might be further away, but equally important to consider. What thoughts do you have about hybridizing the two models? Any thoughts?
That's a tough one for us at Sift because simply, the whole time we've been really focused on the hyperlocal. It's kind of, and I understand that there is that phrase of what is it? Act locally, but think globally. So maybe that is something that we do shift to going forward. Yeah, that's new. So I don't, other than.
Yeah, for my classroom, I find if I just only teach about a place that's far off, the students are harder to engage with it. But if I use that kind of as a model for what we're doing in our community, it's much more successful. So I try to approach it as here's a case study. This is how it worked out here. This is what we're looking. This is our problem, and this was a solution. But then now let's look at that here. So I just trying to make that connection because I think you have a great point, Andrew.
Okay. And then we also had a comment from Susan on that same topic. It provides lots of opportunity to talk about scale in time and space. It's a challenging concept for many, and it's a good discussion point. So thank you, Susan. Okay, so we have a question from Jessica for Jordan. Do you feel you can find folks in the outside organizations, partners and professionals who have similar identities to the students? We've learned so much about the importance of seeing people like you in science to forming an identity as scientists or considering it as a possible future. Is this something you intentionally seek out?
Yeah, great question, Jessica. Thank you for that. Well, I'll start off by saying my students, there's like 5 careers they all want to do. They want to be a police officer, a teacher, a coach, a nurse, or what's the other one? Anyway, those are the key careers because that's all they see in their community. And so as I've brought in different scientists, a lot of the PhDs don't look like them. And what's funny is they're like, hey, mister, do you see how we change our language? I'm like, what do you mean? Like we started speaking professional and using really formal language. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did see that. And I asked them, why did you do that? And they said, well, we didn't want them to think different. Like we didn't want them to think poorly of us. So it's funny because they immediately use academic language and change their tone, and they're very professional. But to answer your question, I do think about that a lot, and it's interesting because I think as I connect with community orgs, the people from Los Angeles, they're very connected. So our friends from the LA River, we have a girl who grew up, a woman who grew up in a school just like them, and now she's kind of the river expert, kind of teaching them. So I do think about that. But I welcome everyone because it's really, I think it's good for exposure, you know, and it is funny how they kind of shift their language or shift their body language. And yeah, but I do intentionally seek that out. But I mean, it's not always easy, you know, especially it's the representation of different, you know, cultures and races in higher education. So.
Thank you. So a question. So we have a comment from Paul. I may have missed the mention of this, but my students are using the Seek app powered by iNaturalist to do a backyard arthropod biodiversity study. Seek has worked extremely well. So thank you, Paul. Has anyone else used Seek here as part of that? And then a question from Mark. Andy, I'm looking for ideas for organismal experiments students can conduct remotely from home. Would love to hear what your ant baiting experiment involved. How did it work, and do you have other ideas for remote fieldwork experiments?
Yeah, so the experimental design project is one that we've done in every cohort with the Sift students, and we do start with an ant baiting project as their initial experiment. So the students simply take 2 different kinds of bait, and they go through the scientific process of doing research, asking a question, making a hypothesis, creating an experiment, and then providing their results. So from that experiment, students then go and they build their own hypothetical experiments, simply saying like, does height make a difference in which ants come to which baits, or what, you know, or observational experiments and what would happen if 2 different species of ants show up to the same bait, what kind of reactions or what kind of relationships or things happen between the 2 ants. And what's really fascinating with these experiments, and so I just want to say that I usually push off these teaching about this experimental design project to our professionals. I'm much more of like an educator, so scientific investigations and research really isn't my realm, but I'm learning. But what I found is really fascinating is these students come up with some fantastic experimental design projects. One student's hypothetical project was putting ants, it's kind of like the Mad Max, like 2 ants enter, 1 ant leaves type thing, which was kind of weird, but and then and I can always share our ant baiting activity guide with Katrina. Katrina, if you want to somehow post that somewhere, that might be something that would be easier to share with folks, simply because one of our visiting scientists, Dr. James Traeger, he created this. And so his language is much more appropriate for sharing about this than I can think of right now. But we've also done simple observation activities of like roly-polies or pill bugs, kind of just making observations based on them and how they react with their environment. There's a pretty famous experiment exercise out there with asking students to simply do a square foot experiment where you're just making observations of all the living things and all the living interactions within that square foot, and then having kids design experiments around that understanding. But look, I'll share that with Katrina, and hopefully she can post that somewhere where you all can find it.
Yep, be happy to do that. Does anyone else on the panelists have ideas for things that are good to do sort of in your backyard, something that you can have students do independently?
So I mean, the iNaturalist, like what Conchi was talking about, that's a fantastic, just even if doing a BioBlitz or everything in the backyard. But I've also, during the training week, we did scavenger hunts via iNaturalist. So what we did, like Monday would be an oppositely arranged flowering plant. And so the students utilized iNaturalist and took pictures of and they learned what an oppositely arranged plant is. And then they would go and take pictures of it every single day. And then Wednesday would be arthropods. So the students would have to go out and do a BioBlitz on arthropods. So it made it like a fun game, like kind of Conchi was talking about, making that competition aspect of it. And there are a lot of simple activities such as like tree surveys, flowering plant surveys. We did bird surveys through the Merlin Bird app. That's a fantastic one. So what we did most oftentimes was just biological surveys, what's available to us. And that's where the simple part of it and where we started. And then from there, those students took that understanding and then visited with these visiting professionals to learn more. So surveys.
So we have oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think also, I haven't done it, but it's an idea I have that you can study distribution and, you know, look at the area where you're working and see what species are there, and then, you know, study how they're distributed within that particular area, or try to do some density estimates or abundance estimates also with that. And we had somebody came up and saying that we were not fair with the way the competition was set up. And they said, well, but because you have many people and we have less people, and that was not fair. And so somebody said, well, we should have come with a normalization and come up with an idea to normalize, and then have a better, I guess, a better way of deciding who was the winner. So maybe all those things can be used, I guess, for projects, different projects, to use the data that is coming up with in iNaturalist.
Someone, Brian, it looks like Brian has asked, did the BioBlitz yield any surprising finds, rare species in unexpected areas?
No, that I can think of, but I think, I guess it was the opposite. We learned what is so common, that you find these species everywhere, and maybe I think we have a problem with, well, introduced species, and I think it was that people were reporting snakes. We have native snakes, but we don't have like pythons or other kinds, and now we're starting to find them. So probably that was something to find out where they are with the iNaturalist, as people were reporting that they were seeing them. But no, I don't recall having like a rare species or something unexpected. But could you know, something like that can happen.
We had another question about the BioBlitz and iNaturalist from Bruce Grant. I've been doing BioBlitz in my undergraduate classes too. My question is, have you had success in data science skills development by having your students download and put their data in context to these large-scale databases? And I'm wondering if these efforts would also contribute to student motivation to learn science by increasing the authenticity of their work as citizen scientists. Any thoughts on using the data from these surveys?
Well, I haven't done that, but yeah, that will be very, very good to do. And well, we have 1 year we had students from the computer science department, and we integrated them. They developed a database where we were reporting the species and they were entering the data, and then we got reports at the end of the BioBlitz. But that's the extent of what we're doing. But I think that will be excellent to develop something with big data. And okay, this is my data. I'm contributing to this project.
So I have a question. I think we've gotten through most of the questions here. We've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to ask you all, especially maybe Andy and Jordan, you've worked with lots of scientists and brought lots of scientists in to talk to high school students. What advice would you give to scientists that are looking to do something like that? Like, what is the most impactful thing that those scientists that are coming into the classroom for a little while can do with their time?
I'll start. I think one of the most impactful things that our Sift students got out of meeting those scientists was when the scientists took time to share about their personal experiences and their, I don't want to say private lives, but how they got to where they were, what the academic pathways they took, and what their career pathways were as well. I think that was super impactful, simply because most of my students have this maybe a misunderstanding that the pathway to your career is linear. And what many of these researchers shared with the students is that sometimes they went to college for a completely different degree. We met someone who had a history degree with a minor in philosophy who is now supervising ecological restoration at Shaw Nature Reserve. So I think and that really helped. And also understanding that you can do a lot of traveling in environmental sciences. And that was something that was really, the students' ears just picked right up, doing these part-time work that took you all across the country or all across the world. But really, instead of having the scientists simply talk about what their research is and what they're doing now, it was much more beneficial to hear how they got there and the struggles that they went through and the successes they went through. And it made them more of a human being than just simply a scientist. And that ecological identity tree activity is really good too.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's one of the things I ask each scientist who's come in, talk about your experience and how you got to where you are now. But I would say the other big thing that's been really helpful is, and maybe most important for my students, is understanding why their research and why their field is so important for them. And so even if they're not going into science and they're just going to continue living their lives in Los Angeles, like why does studying woodpeckers somewhere far off, like why does that impact them? Or Dr. Matthew Bond, a friend of mine, came to my classroom and talked about, studying how people use different plants. And then he brought things in to show them why it's important to them and why moving away from plant-based products and plant-based things are detrimental for the society. And so I think making that connection to the research and what they did has been really powerful.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. I'm taking a quick look now through the chat. Okay, so one more question here. This will probably be the last one. Asking all panelists if you felt you needed to take time to get to know students in order to motivate them to be interested in science. And again, why they care about these things, which I think is pretty much just what your answer to that question was. But do you all have anything to add about getting to know the students and using that as a motivator as well to connect them to the science?
Well, yes, and I think this is the challenge now with the online classes, that I might be able to talk to some of them, but not all of them. And there's the silent students that I just see, and for me, they don't turn on cameras. I don't see them. So because even I ask them, turn on your cameras, they don't. So what can I do? Okay, it's your privacy, right? And then I read later that students in the classroom, students are used to seeing you, but they're not used to seeing themselves and seeing the other students. So it's better. So then I decided, well, okay, I won't ask them to turn on the cameras. It was just me, talking and giving the lecture. So usually, you know, is that I have most of the students that, I mean, it's some students that are always asking questions and some students that they don't ask questions. So it depends on the class. I have another class which are 8 students, and this is a research class, so it's very easy for me to, you know, I call them and we talk one-on-one, and that's really good. And I, you know, it's just the student and me, and we can talk about anything, and I can help solve the problems with the class, and I get to learn them. But in a bigger class, it's difficult.
Well, thank you all so much. This was an amazing series of keynotes. I think it's pretty clear how they all fit together. And these are topics that we have been talking about and we'll continue to talk about through the rest of the conference. So the other Andy, would you like to, or is it Teresa that's coming on next to talk about the rest of the day?
Yeah, we could, what we need to do is thank you so much to the keynote speakers. That was fantastic. So Jordan, Conchi, and Andy. And thank you to Katrina for moderating that. I think we're going to turn it over to Jessica right now.
Yeah, really quick, I just wanted to remind everybody, we have so many great resources that we've talked about over the past couple of days, but let's share these with your community. Use the Life Discovery EcoEd Digital Library as an opportunity to publish your peer-reviewed ideas or even images and PowerPoints. There are 3 different ways that you can submit. So through the EcoEd Digital Library, the PlantEd Digital Library, or the EvoEd Digital Library. And you can find all these unique links on our website, but I don't want you to miss this opportunity to share these with each other. And also, tomorrow I'm going to be sending out an email, and I actually sent one out. Actually, it won't be tomorrow, but probably Monday. But I sent one out today, and we would really, really, really appreciate your feedback about this conference. This is the first conference we've ever hosted online. So your information about your experience is really important to us so that we can improve if we need to, or if we did a great job, we'd love to hear that too. So I'd really appreciate that. And also, I just wanted to mention very quickly that the Zoom app that you use, if you could update that, that would be a fantastic thing for us. Maybe it won't work today, but in the future, Zoom is coming out with these new features that work for breakouts, and it might be useful for you as educators as well. So if you update the app, I'm guilty, I don't update it as often as I should, but that's something to keep in mind, is to try to regularly update that app. And then Andy, I'm going to kick it back over to you so you can talk about next year.
Hi, everybody again. So before I get to next year, I just want to make sure to thank, I mean, there's a lot of people involved. I mean, basically everybody that's here is involved, but there are people, I want to thank all the presenters. I want to thank the advisory board, the students that helped out in the rooms. I want to thank the support staff, especially Jessica, who's been amazing, and Teresa. And I really want to thank ecologists and teachers everywhere, because they're the ones who are striving to make the world a better place and to advance ecological and scientific citizens. So our next planned meeting is to try it again in Estes Park. And there's a picture of what you'd be, your sort of backyard if you're at the park. So it sits right at the gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park. It's a gorgeous place to be. We would be at the YMCA, which is a big place to have meetings like this. And so hopefully you'll put this on your calendar. So Pushing Past Barriers, Ecological Science for All, Take 2. And so September 30th to October 2nd, 2021, the trees will be turning colors, the elk will be bugling, and we will be with each other discussing ecology and teaching. So our next event is the 4DE showcase that starts at 12:30. So you have 15 minutes to sort of get yourself, eat or whatever you need to do. And thanks again to those awesome keynote speakers that we just saw. So on break.